you think that we have to radically rethink free speech and understand sometimes there have to be limits to stop things like fascism?
Yeah, I really do, because I do think that, this comes up all the time now, got to protect free speech, but the Nazis were free speech, but that doesn't mean you should protect it. So, I think you do kind of have to redraw it, and obviously it's hard because who gets to arbitrate that, but I do think there are limits.
The president was ensconced in the White House on Saturday, monitoring this crisis. Right outside and across the country, protest marches.
Celebrities, politicians joining the many women's marches. ABC's Eva Pilgrim joins us in studio. Eva, what did you see at the march here in New York?
They want to enact to save DACA, and what they're doing is trying to march several blocks as it went down West Avenue.
I said indict, convict, send that killer cop to jail. The whole damn system is guilty as I said indict.
This is the country we're in now, right? Where if you don't, unless you're Donald Trump, by the way, then you can go bankrupt 6 different times and never pay your bills. But if you're poor or middle class, God help you, you don't pay $1 that you owe, we're gonna crush you.
What next? After all the dramatic speeches by the young survivors of gun violence, after all the celebrity appearances, after all the marches across the country and the world, can this movement produce any real change?
Almost overnight, the diverse group of demonstrators grew to tens of thousands, spreading to hundreds of cities across America.
But don't misunderstand me. They hunt, they shoot, they have a good time. But he said, we don't have any issues with background checks. Right. He said, if we're trying to do background checks on people who may be mentally challenged or they have all kind of criminal background, if you're complaining about it, he said, then I'm going to assume that you're mentally challenged or you got a criminal background. Yeah. You have no reason not to accept a background check.
Yeah.
Ever.
Every tax cut, every tax increase is different. Let me give you some example from history. This was the Bush tax cuts, 2001 and 2011. Look what happened here. Employment grew very slowly here, and real GDP grew just less than 3%. So this is kind of a mixed response to a tax cut from President Bush. But what about President Clinton? He was raising taxes. He was raising taxes, and employment surged, and so did GDP.
Look, I know that an intellectual's hierarchy of needs peaks at moral superiority, but give it a rest. Punching a Nazi is the ethical choice, because people only become Nazis when they didn't get that urge punched out of them in childhood.
What you said in your book in chapter 8 was shocking to me. You wrote, let's be honest, facts don't lie. No one can argue away the data that clearly shows that African Americans account for a wildly disproportionate number of arrests, street stops, use of force incidents, incarcerations, and other measurable events within our criminal justice system. You understand why that's a fact, because they are disproportionately stopped and arrested.
The phrase "all lives matter" was derived from Black Lives Matter to subvert Black Lives Matter, and I won't come here and sit down and say that that's okay.
The reason that people do not perceive that we are living in the wealthiest country in the history of the world is that almost all of the wealth and much of the income is going to the top 1%.
A blatantly racist appeal by President Trump and his party.
And yet here we are with the biggest private sector spending the most. Why is a free market so bad at controlling the cost of health?
Do not even start with me that you're just going to attack sources.
Okay, so
that
what
is
about,
ridiculous.
so are you saying McMaster's wrong? Look into the history of it, that's exactly right.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
While you are making music and being an artist and living the life that you've earned by being a genius, the rest of us in society have to deal with these threats to our lives. We have to deal with the marginalization that has come from the 400 years of slavery.
They say that tougher gun laws do not decrease gun violence. We call BS!
Victim is guilty. Now, in reality, about 68% of victims of sexual crimes don't report, and only 2% of rapists ever see a day in jail. Does that mean that 98% of people are just lying? No, it means that our
caravan of nearly 2,000 Central Americans is making its way toward the U.S. tonight. They started crossing into southern Mexico last weekend, and Adriana Diaz, who
If you want to understand racism, you need to talk sociology. And sociology explains racism as a combination of prejudice and power.
It's 75,000 people who are not mentally competent enough to handle their own affairs. Like, why would you give them the right to have a gun, which is a lethal weapon?
You know, if that's what radical means, call me a radical.
The time has come.